This is Richard Flax at MoneyFarm, talking about some of the things that have caught our attention over the past few days. In the US, we've seen a number of attorney generals in US states bring antitrust actions against Facebook. And some of the proposals are quite significant. They involve, for instance, separating Instagram and WhatsApp from Facebook. And that suggests a couple of things to us. First, that this process will take a number of years, given how significant some of these changes could potentially be. Facebook will no doubt fight this action and argue that they're being penalized for their success. And the second part is that there seems to be a growing consensus in the US and elsewhere that certain large cap tech companies need to face tighter regulation than they have done in the past. And that's something that we need to consider, particularly in the context of how much of the rally in the US over the past 6 or 8 months has really been driven by large cap tech companies. Elsewhere in the US, it's still unclear who will control the US Senate. There's a runoff election in Georgia at the beginning of January, and if Democrats were to win both of those seats, they would control the Senate just. And that has some implications for policy and potentially for markets as well. If we saw the US Democrats control the Senate, we'd likely to see a larger fiscal stimulus, potentially higher taxation, and potentially more regulation. We'd also probably see a slightly different mix in the cabinet of the incoming administration. There are certain people we think who have not been put forward so far by the president-elect because he and his team know that they would be rejected by Republican senators if the Republicans control the Senate. So that's something we'll continue to keep an eye on. In the Eurozone, we saw the ECB extend its bond buying program. Again, not a huge surprise, but good news nonetheless. We saw progress on the EU budget with a deal between Poland and Hungary and the rest of the member states. Again, these are not great surprises, but they do reassure us that there will continue to be meaningful policy support, both on monetary and perhaps on fiscal as well, to help underpin the recovery that we expect to see in 2021. Lastly, in the UK, Brexit dominates, and it remains very opaque. The Prime Minister has reminded everyone that no deal is a real possibility, whether that's aimed at the British public or at the EU negotiators is perhaps a moot point. From our perspective, we think that the economic logic argues for a deal of some sort. But we're also reminded that these problems have been discussed for a number of months now without any clear resolution, and they appear quite intractable. And just because there is an economic logic doesn't mean that will result in a deal. So with that in mind, we'll keep focused on those likely outcomes. We continue to think that sterling is pricing in some sort of a deal and would weaken if we didn't see one. But we think that from a portfolio perspective, the portfolios are fairly globally diversified and so should be able to weather any local volatility relatively well. With that in mind, I'd like to thank you for joining us and look forward to speaking to you again soon.